Before I tell you this story, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. No, honestly, close them. I want you to visualize a hospital room, white walls, the harsh fragrance of antiseptic, the mechanical sound of a cardiac monitor beep, 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 counting down the seconds of your life like a metronome you didn't ask for. Now imagine your parents standing at the door. Coats already buttoned, car keys already in hand. Imagine them gazing at you, their child, and deciding to walk away. Not because they couldn't help you, but because they thought you weren't worth it. That is where this story begins. In that room, on that day, with that quiet. But here's the thing they never counted on. They never knew that once they were heading out the door of the hospital, I was the one who had been secretly paying for the door of their house for 10 years. My name is Leo, and this is the story of how the most painful betrayal of my life became the most powerful moment of my release. Stay with me. Every single minute of this narrative matters. Let me give you a picture of my family so you understand exactly what I was stepping into. My parents, Arthur and Martha, formed their entire identity around the idea of being nice people. They went to every neighborhood cookout. They volunteered at the church fundraiser. They informed anyone who would listen that they believed in God, in karma, in the cosmos, and in putting family first. Beautiful words. And for a long time I believed them. My younger sister Chloe was, and I say this with no animosity, only fact, the golden child. She had a gift for being gentle, for needing goods, for making the room tilt in her way without ever raising a finger. She aspired to be a travel vlogger, then an artist, then a wellness influencer, then a lifestyle coach. Every new dream came with a price tag, and somehow every price tag found its way back to my parents. And my folks, they enjoyed nothing more than paying it. Me? I was different. From the time I was 17, I was the one who figured things out. Got scholarships, worked double shifts, built a career in finance that needed me to think 10 steps ahead at all times. My parents called it being independent. They said it with pride. What they meant was, Leo doesn't need us. And so, very early on, they stopped asking. They stopped asking if I was okay. They stopped asking if I was struggling. They stopped asking, period. And because I loved them, because I was the resilient one, I let them. I told myself, this is what strong people do. They hold things together without grumbling. They protect people they love, even when those people don't see it. I had no notion that one day my body would stop being robust. And the folks I had spent a decade safeguarding would tell me exactly what that protection was worth to them. It started with tiredness. The kind that coffee doesn't touch. The kind where you wake up already fatigued. Where your legs feel like they're wrapped in wet cement. Where simply sitting upright needs a kind of negotiation with your own body. I disregarded it for months. Because that's what I did. I pushed through. Then came the swelling. My ankles. My hands. My face in the morning appeared bloated. Alien, like a stranger was borrowing my skin overnight. Then the statistics came back from the blood test. And my doctor sat me down with the type of meticulous, measured calm that tells you, before a single word is spoken, that what's coming is going to change everything. Chronic renal disease stage 4, she remarked. We need to start discussing transplant options. I remember quite clearly the sound the room made when she said that. Not silence exactly. More like the world rearranging itself around a new center of gravity. I drove home alone. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 45 minutes. I didn't weep. I didn't call anyone. I made a list. Because it is what I do. I make lists. I find solutions. I figure it out. At the top of the list I wrote living donor, highest success rate, best match, closest relatives. And for the first time in a very long time I allowed myself need my family. It was the most expensive mistake I had ever made. I asked them to come to the hospital for the consultation. My mother, my father, and Chloe, who I hadn't asked to come, but who came anyway because wherever my parents went, Chloe orbited. The transplant coordinator had run preliminary blood work. She came back into the room with a quiet kind of optimism, the optimism of someone who spends her days fighting against odds and was today winning. Both parents are compatible matches, she said. Either one would be an excellent candidate for a direct living donation. The success rate for a living donor is significantly higher than a cadaver transplant, and recovery time. My father cleared his throat. My mother reached over and wrapped her hand around Chloe's wrist. I watched that motion, my mother reaching for Chloe, and I felt something in my chest collapse. Before the coordinator could finish her sentence, my mother said, "We can't." Just like that. Not let us think about it. Not tell us more. Just, we can't. Her voice was soft. Practiced. The way you practice a thing you've already decided. What if Chloe gets sick someday, she said. We have to keep both options available for her. She's always been more fragile than you, Leo. You've always been the resilient one. You're strong. You'll find another way. The list moves faster than people think. The heart monitor beside my bed began to spike. The beeping quickened. A frantic, mechanical staccato that matched the pounding in my chest. You're gambling my life today, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. On a maybe for Chloe 10 years from now? My father finally looked up from the floor. He glanced at his watch. Don't be dramatic, he said. We're being responsible parents. We have to think about the long-term stability of the family. He straightened his tie. We're going to take Chloe to lunch. She's been pale just being in this ward. We'll call you tonight. I watched them go. My father's hand at the small of my mother's back, guiding her out the door. Chloe glancing back at me once. Not with guilt, not with grief, with the wide, slightly bewildered eyes of someone who had simply never been told that she wasn't the center of everything. The door clicked shut, and I sat there in a thin cotton hospital gown, a plastic ID band itching against my wrist, listening to the machine beside me count out the seconds of a life my own family had just decided wasn't worth the risk of a spare part. They didn't leave because they couldn't give me what I needed. They left because they had already decided that what I needed mattered less than what Chloe might need someday. They chose a hypothetical future for their favorite daughter over the very real, very present survival of their other one. And they walked out to lunch. Now I need to take you back. 10 years to be exact. Because to understand what happened next, you need to understand what had been happening all along. My father ran a consulting firm for most of my childhood. Small but steady. It paid for the house, the cars, the private piano lessons Chloe quit after 3 months, the family vacations we took every summer. Then the economy shifted. A few large contracts fell through. A partnership dissolved. And seemingly overnight, the firm was gone. I was 22 years old. I had just started my first real job in finance. I was making good money, not extraordinary money, but enough to live carefully and save aggressively, which I did, because I am my father's daughter in all the ways he never noticed. I came home one weekend to find a notice taped to the front door. A formal letter from the bank. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. The kind of letter that ends with a date and a time, after which someone else's name goes on the mailbox. My father was in his study, staring at the wall. My mother was on the phone, crying, telling her sister that the universe had turned its back on them. Nobody called me. They hadn't thought to. I went home that night. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop. And I did what I always do. I made a list. I found a solution. I figured it out. I consulted a property lawyer. I set up a shell company, Heritage Holdings LLC. I bought the debt. I restructured the terms. I became, on paper, the anonymous private lender who had quietly stepped in to save the family home. Every month for 10 years I moved money from my account into that company. The mortgage, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance. Every single bill that kept that house a home I paid. They never asked where the money came from. They told themselves the universe was providing. They told the neighbors they were blessed people, protected by their faith and their good energy. They told me I was too focused on money, too materialistic, not as spiritually evolved as Chloe. I was the universe, and they didn't know my name. For 10 years I funded their lifestyle while they critiqued mine. I paid for the roof over their heads while they told me I needed to work on my inner abundance. I made sure Chloe's failed startups and creative retreats didn't leave them financially exposed while they told me I was too practical to understand what really mattered. I was practical enough to save them, and I was foolish enough to think that was enough. A week after the hospital visit, I was home. I had just finished a 4-hour dialysis session. If you've never experienced dialysis, let me describe it for you. They take your blood out of your body, filter it through a machine because your kidneys no longer can, and put it back. For 4 hours. You sit there. You feel every minute of it. When it's done, you don't feel better, you feel scraped clean. Like the inside of you has been wrung out and put back wrong. I was under 3 blankets. My teeth were chattering. I hadn't eaten because nothing sounded possible. My phone buzzed. It was a group chat, me, my parents, and Chloe. Chloe had typed, "Hey Leo. I know you're dealing with your medical stuff, but my car's alternator went out. I need $800 to get to this influencer retreat in Sedona. You're not really using your car anyway right now, so could you just Venmo me? It's for my career." My mother replied 20 seconds later, "Leo, be a sweetheart and help your sister. You know how delicate her career is right now. You've always been the strong one. A little fatigue doesn't slow you down. Do this for the family." I stared at that screen. A little fatigue. I was counting the cost of my own funeral, and she called it a little fatigue. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment because I think a lot of you already know this feeling. It wasn't rage. It was something much quieter and much more final than rage. It was the feeling of a door closing. Not being slammed. Not being locked. Just closing. Softly. With a finality that echoes. You cannot keep pouring yourself into people who see the pouring as proof that the well will never run dry. Resilient had been the story they told themselves to justify taking from me without guilt. If I was strong, then taking from me didn't hurt me. If I was the capable one, then asking me for more was just good resource management. If I never complained, then I must not have anything to complain about. I put my phone down on the nightstand. I called my lawyer. "Send the notice," I told him. "Transfer the deed. Reveal the owner." My voice was completely steady. That was the night I stopped being the resilient one. That was the night I chose myself. I want to walk you through what happened next step by step because the details matter. I logged into the Heritage Holdings portal. I deactivated the automatic payment schedule. I initiated a legal transfer of the property deed from the shell company into my personal name, which was my right, as I had been servicing the debt for a decade. I instructed my property attorney to send a formal notice of ownership transfer to the house. Not a text message. Not a phone call. A legal courier. Because this was no longer a family matter. This was a financial matter. And I was going to treat it with the same professionalism they had denied me in that hospital room. I also did one more thing. I printed a ledger. A complete line-by-line 10-year accounting of every payment I had made on their behalf. Mortgage. Insurance. Taxes. Emergency repairs. The new furnace in 2018. The roof in 2020. The plumbing crisis in 2022 that I handled from my desk at work while they were on a spiritual wellness trip in Bali that, incidentally, I had also helped fund. 120 months. 1,440 individual transactions. Every one of them labeled, dated, and sourced. I printed it, put it in a folder, and set it on my kitchen table. Then I packed a bag for the private recovery center I had arranged. Because I had also, quietly, without telling anyone, been working another angle. A distant cousin. Someone I had barely spoken to since we were teenagers. He had seen a post I made. A quiet, hopeful thing about waiting for a transplant match. He had gotten himself tested. He was a match. He didn't call me to negotiate. He didn't bring conditions. He just said, "You've been carrying everyone else for too long. Let me do something for you." That one sentence undid something in me that 10 years of stoic resilience had tried to seal shut. There are people in this world who give freely, who see your need not as an inconvenience, but as an invitation to be human. My family had taught me to be suspicious of my own need. This man, this near stranger, reminded me that need is not weakness. Need is just need. And sometimes the people meant to meet it aren't the ones you share a last name with. The courier delivered the notice on a Tuesday afternoon. By 3 o'clock I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Then another. Then the sound of shoes on my front porch. Fast, urgent. The footsteps of people who have just discovered that the ground they were standing on belonged to someone else. I was sitting in a chair on the porch when they came around the corner. My father first. His face a map of fury and confusion, the legal notice crumpled in his hand. My mother behind him, her eyes wide. Her lipstick slightly uneven in the way that happens when someone has been crying and reapplied in a hurry. And Chloe last, her phone out, head slightly tilted. processing this through the lens of a potential story. "What is this?" my father demanded, thrusting the papers at me. "The bank says our mortgage is in default. They say the property is owned by some company and now by you? What kind of sick joke?" "It's not a joke, Dad," I said. I didn't stand up. I want you to understand that I did not stand up. As I didn't need to. Heritage Holdings is me. It's always been me. I've been paying your mortgage for 10 years. My mother made a sound I had never heard her make before. Something between a gasp and a word that didn't quite form. "But, the universe," she started. "Was me, Mom," I said. "I was the universe. The grant money. The anonymous benefactor. The inexplicable good fortune that let you keep your house when Dad's firm collapsed. That was me. Working 80-hour weeks. Making choices you never saw and never asked about." I reached beside me and picked up the folder. I held it out to my father. He took it with hands that weren't quite steady. "That's a line-by-line record of every cent I spent to keep you in that house," I said. "While you were telling me I was too focused on money. While you were funding Chloe's retreats and her ring lights and her failed startups. While you were in that hospital room telling me that my life wasn't worth the risk of a kidney." Chloe lowered her phone. "Where will we go?" she asked. Her voice had lost its usual certainty. For the first time I heard something in it I'd never heard before. The sound of someone who has just realized that the world does not, in fact, orbit around her. "You're resilient, Chloe," I said quietly. "I'm sure you'll find another way." I used my mother's exact words. Same cadence. Same tone. Not cruelly, just honestly. Sometimes the only way to return a lesson is in the language it was first given. "I'm selling the property to cover my transplant costs," I continued. "You have 60 days. I'll provide a fair market reference for rental options in the area. But Heritage Holdings is closed. The universe has retired." My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked, for the first time in my memory, like a man who did not have an answer. And I realized that beneath all the bravado, all the lectures about spirituality and long-term thinking and responsible parenting, he had always counted on me to solve what he couldn't. The difference was, he'd never bothered to say thank you. The surgery went well. I want to say that plainly without drama because after everything, after all the heartache and the negotiations and the paperwork and the dialysis sessions and the lonely nights under 3 blankets, those 4 words feel like the most important sentence I have ever spoken. The surgery went well. My cousin was there when I woke up. He was sitting in the chair beside my bed, reading something on his phone, and when he noticed I was awake he just looked up and said, "There she is." 2 words. But they held everything I had been missing for so long. The simple, unconditional recognition that I was here. That I mattered. That someone had noticed. My parents tried to come to the recovery center. They sent flowers, a large arrangement with a card that said, "We didn't know the extent of your sacrifice, and we're so sorry." I read that card twice. We didn't know the extent. Not, "We're sorry we chose wrong." Not, "We're sorry we looked you in the eyes and walked away." Not, "We're sorry that we spent 10 years eating the fruit of your labor, while telling you the tree wasn't spiritual enough." We didn't know the extent. Which means, if the sacrifice had been smaller, the apology might not have come. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were sorry that the person who had been holding their world together had finally let it fall, and they were standing in the rubble. I didn't let them in. Not with cruelty. Not with a speech. I just asked the nurse to let them know I was resting and would be in touch when I was ready. And then I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 10 years I didn't think about their mortgage. I didn't calculate their insurance. I didn't worry about Chloe's next creative pivot or my father's pride or my mother's feelings. I just breathed. And it was the deepest breath I had ever taken. I've thought a lot about what I want to say to you in this last part. Because I know that some of you watching this are living inside your own version of this story. Maybe it's not a kidney. Maybe it's your time, your money, your emotional energy, your mental health, your dreams that you quietly folded up and put away so that someone else's dreams could have more room. Maybe you're the resilient one in your family, the one they call capable, the one they call strong, the one they reach for when things go wrong and set down when things go right. And maybe some part of you has started to wonder, is this love? Or is this just Useful? Here is what I know now, standing on the other side of the hardest year of my life. Resilience is not the absence of need. Resilience is the capacity to survive great pain and keep going. It is not an invitation for the people who love you to cause that pain without consequence. Loyalty is not a one-way current. It is not measured by who gives the most or sacrifices the hardest. It is measured by who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses you anyway, even when choosing you costs them something. And love, real love, does not calculate whose future is worth more. It does not draw up a ledger of who is more fragile, who is more valuable, who is more deserving of protection. Real love sees the person in front of them, not the hypothetical. The person, right there, breathing, needing. My family taught me what love is not. My cousin taught me what love is. And somewhere in the space between those two lessons I found the most important thing. I learned that I was worth saving. Not because of what I provided. Not because of what I paid. Not because of how strong I was or how quietly I suffered. Just because I was here and I was me and I deserved to keep living. That is the lesson they couldn't have planned to teach me. And I am in the strangest way grateful for it. Before you go, I want to ask you something. And I want you to actually sit with it. Not just scroll past. Sit with it. Is there someone in your life right now who treats your strength like an excuse to need you more? Someone who calls you capable as a way of never asking if you're okay? Someone whose "I believe in you" really means, "I believe you'll handle this so I don't have to"? And the harder question, are you letting them? I'm not here to tell you to cut everyone off. Families are complicated. Love is complicated. History is heavy and forgiveness is real, and I believe in the possibility of people changing. But I am here to tell you that putting on your own oxygen mask first is not selfishness. It is survival. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for the people who have hurt you, is to stop being the answer to a question they've never been forced to ask themselves. Let them ask the question. Let them figure out the answer. That is not abandonment. That is finally telling the truth about what was never sustainable. If this story moves something in you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've been the resilient one. Tell me if you've ever felt invisible in the family that was supposed to see you most. I read every single one. If you're learning, even slowly, even painfully, to put yourself first, hit that subscribe button. Because we're going to keep having these conversations. The hard ones. The honest ones. The ones that feel like something finally being said out loud. I'm Leo. I'm still here. Thank you for watching.